Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter, and today I have a little happy trio of cards. I'm going to be using some products from Neat and Tangled. And when I first started out, I thought I was only making one card project, but it kind of snowballed into three, so just bear with me here. I'm going to lay out my first card project, and what I'm doing is cutting apart the sentiment that says happy birthday because I want to combine it with the happy portion of the Happy Holidays die set. Now this die set, even though it's a holiday die set, can really be used year round, and I'm going to show you how. That sentiment along with this cupcake is from the Sketchy Cupcake stamp set from Neat and Tangled. Now I'm going to start these cards out by cutting this tiny triangles background from some white linen cardstock. This is from Essentials by Ellen. I really wanted to use the white linen cardstock because it has a little bit of texture to it. And since these cards are going to have a lot of white on white on white, I really wanted that texture in there to keep them from feeling too flat. So while I have my die cut machine out, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my precision base plate and cut the happy portion of that Happy Holidays die set out of some gold glitter cardstock. And you can see I'm left with that really beautiful sentiment there. Now I'm going to take some Essentials by Ellen. This is the 43-pound vellum. I'm cutting it to be slightly larger than that tiny triangles background that I cut out. And I'm also going to take a scrap of that same vellum and heat emboss that birthday portion of that sentiment onto this vellum. I've prepped the surface with my EK Success powder tool, and now I'm just inking that up in some Versamark ink, and I'm going to stamp it onto that vellum scrap and then sprinkle on some white embossing powder and heat set that. Now, if you don't want to cut your stamps apart, you can always do a little bit of masking, but I find I get so much more use out of my stamps when I do a little surgery on them from time to time, and then I can use them in a lot of different ways. Now, the only bit of color that's really going to be on this card is on this vellum. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking some Copic markers. I've listed them in the supply portion over at my blog, and I'm just kind of making a rainbow pattern. So I'm starting out with a pink color and then an orange and a yellow, and I'll move all the way across this, and I'm just kind of scribbling it messily. You can see I'm not really taking a whole lot of care to be real careful. Some are longer stripes than others, but that's okay. I was really going for a loose look. Now the purple that I used was a little too intense, and so I'm just removing some of that color using an alcohol swab. Now the color that I linked over at my blog in the description is a lighter color. I actually used it on the second card project, and so that one worked out much better. So now it's time to stamp my cupcake. I'm going to do a little bit of Copic coloring on this as well, but I wanted to do some no-line Copic coloring. So I'm taking this pink hybrid ink. This is from My Favorite Things. It's a Copic friendly ink, and I'm stamping it onto some Nina Solar white cardstock. And then I'm going to use some of these R20, 21, and 22 markers to color that in. Now, because the outline is stamped in that pink Copic friendly ink, it's going to kind of disappear. So I'm using the darker colors to create some shadow along the base lines of those frosting layers, I guess. So I started by coloring the entire image with my lightest color. I brought in the medium color, kind of brought it maybe 2/3 of the way across that cupcake, and then I'm taking the darkest color and kind of adding it to the edges, that left edge over there. I did end up bringing it a little bit further across to kind of accentuate those different frosting lines, and then just blended it back out again with my medium color. Now, I thought that the lines were getting a little too lost. So I came actually back in with an R17 marker just to trace around very lightly some of those lines. And you can see this really cool effect that you get. It's fun to stamp with black ink and use Copic markers, but this is something a little bit different that you can try along with them. So I'm using the My Favorite Things hybrid ink. The Studio Calico inks are also Copic friendly, so you could use those. Just stamp it in a color that's coordinating with the colors you plan on using. Now for the base of the cupcake, I'm inking it up in some Avery Elle pigment ink, and then I'm kissing it to this background stamp. And what that's going to do is create a little polka dot pattern in that cupcake base. Now that cupcake base stamp is actually a solid stamp, but by kissing it to that background stamp, I've added a little bit of texture. And since I stamped that a little bit further down than I wanted to, I went back and kind of filled in that gap with some of my Copic markers again. Now I'm taking my EK Success scissors and I'm just trimming around this, kind of fussy cutting this image. And then I'm going to use my pink marker again. I believe this is the lightest, to just go around the edge of that to kind of clean up the edges and take away any white that might be showing through. It just makes it look like I got a nice perfect cup on that cut on the cupcake, not cup on the cupcake. So once I got that cut out, I went ahead and added some foam adhesive to the back of this tiny triangles die cut that I created, and I'm going to use that to mount it to the rainbow piece of vellum that I created. Now, I like to add a little bit of foam adhesive between my layers with the vellum because it adds a little lift to them, kind of adds to the really cool effect that is vellum rather than mounting it straight down onto the card front. And I also added some foam adhesive along the back side of the vellum so that will lift off of the card front as well. I'm just using my Zig two-way glue pen here to adhere the bottom part of this happy die cut to the birthday part of that sentiment that's on the vellum. And before I mount this over the cupcake, I'm going to just go over the frosting of the cupcake with my clear Wink of Stella, and I got a little blob out there, but it all turned out good in the end. And then I'm going to use that same Zig two-way glue pen to adhere my sentiment to that cupcake, and so I have a little grouping there. Now you can see I've added a little bit of acetate along that left-hand side. It's some polka dot acetate from We Are Memory Keepers, a little strip of some gold glitter cardstock to bring in that gold glitter element again. And now I'm just mounting my layered up background piece there onto my card front, kind of centered. And then I finished it off by adding my cupcake to that grouping over on the left-hand side. And you can see I actually added a layer of glossy accents over that gold glitter sentiment as well, and it just really makes it shine. Now for the second card, I'm using a lot of the same elements, but I thought it would be fun to kind of cut this happy out a few different times. I'm going to mount it onto that tiny triangles background. That is also cut from the linen cardstock from the Essentials by Ellen line. I'm just using a tiny bit of tape runner adhesive to hold these in place because I'm actually going to stitch them on using my sewing machine and a little bit of gold thread. So I have that rainbow piece of vellum. I created another one. You can see that purple is much better on this one. And I've taken that over and just stitched those sentiments onto my background piece. And now I'm using some tape runner adhesive to adhere it onto the striped acetate from We Are Memory Keepers. Now I've gone ahead and repeated the same embossed sentiment on some vellum. I've just cut it down into some V-shaped or banner ends here, and I'm going to attach it onto that grouping using my tiny attacher. It just seemed like a convenient and easy way to attach it, and it kept it to where I didn't have to hide any adhesive. So on the back of this acetate, I'm adding some foam adhesive that I've cut down into some narrow strips. Because that layered vellum and the layered background is all kind of all on top of each other, that foam adhesive is really well hidden behind all of those layers. And then I'm just going to use that foam adhesive to adhere it onto a white linen cardstock card base. And I finished it off with some sparkling clear sequins there. So you can see I've used that Happy Holidays die set in 2 birthday cards. But since it is a holiday die set, I thought I would use it for its original purpose. So what I'm doing here is just cutting down a piece of pattern paper. This is from the Simple Stories Claus and Company 6x6 paper pad. So it's kind of like meant to be a little journaling card, but I'm going to use it as a background for my sentiment. And I've cut out the entire Happy Holidays for this one out of some gold glitter cardstock. And then I took it over to my sewing machine and then just stitched those on. Now I wanted to mention I am not careful at all when I stitch these on. It's just a real quick stitch. I like the kind of a little bit imperfect look when I add some machine stitching to my cards. So don't stress about that too much if you're not a sewer. I definitely am not. I sew on paper and that is it. I don't even sew buttons on. My husband does that. So I wanted to add a little bit of greenery to this, so I grabbed that Tim Holtz boxwood twine, which I am totally loving for holiday cards. And I'm just attaching that on there using some mini clothespins. And the nice thing about this is it has kind of some wire with it, so you can kind of form it the way that you want. And I'm just using my die snips to snip that off once I get it positioned the way I want to. And then I did squirt some multi-medium in the matte finish behind those to kind of hold it in place, kind of in between those clothespins once I got them all positioned. And then I'm going to use some foam adhesive to adhere this entire thing to a white linen card base once again, using that white linen cardstock on all 3 of these cards. I'm going to finish this card off by adding a little bit of sparkle with some sparkling clear sequins as well as some red sequins, and I'm just adhering those on with some multi-medium in the matte finish. And then I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different with my messiness of gold thread. So I'm just taking a little few loops of that. I added a glue dot to it, and I'm going to just clip it up into one of those clothespins. And I just thought this was a fun and different way to add that gold thread to my card. So that completes my 3rd card for today in this happy little trio of cards. You can really see that Happy Holidays die set can be used year round, and I love it combined with that tiny triangles background as well. As always, I will have links to the featured supplies in the description at YouTube, and I will have a complete list of supplies over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com where you can see more still shots and find more information. As always, thanks for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed these cards, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.